You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, I'm joined by Ollie Kavanagh, the founder at Strike. Ollie, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rian. Delighted to be here. Thanks so much.
Delighted to have you. Spend the first couple of minutes getting to know you, who you are, and then we'll move into some questions around previous roles, lessons learned, and what you're currently doing. So I know you grew up in Strabane and you've spent time in Paris, in the States, in London. Now you're back in Dublin. People can usually point to 1, 2, 3, or 4 figures while they're growing up that inspired them or had a massive impact on who they've turned out to be today. Does anyone spring to mind for you?
Yes, was a couple. Actually, the direction that I went down, which was working in the tech industry, happened. I can pinpoint the moment. Actually, I was doing my A levels, and I was considering going into commerce, actually finance and commerce, and not remotely technical. And I went to a dinner. My uncle Colin Kavanagh took me to a Chamber of Commerce dinner, the Londonderry Chamber of Commerce, I think it was called. And I was sitting beside this chap who was a very interesting older man, and he turned out to be the chairman of the British Computer Society. And so this was really back before the internet, before any kind of big boom in kind of tech. And he, during that meal, convinced me not to go into commerce and finance. He said, go into IT. I guarantee you will have a job for life. It's going to be the most exciting industry to be in. And lo and behold, I did actually, as a result of that conversation. So that I suppose was a pivotal moment. And then my first actual boss in the tech industry was a guy called John Hargreaves in England, and he took me under kind of his wing. I was in tech sales, in my first kind of tech sales role, and he taught me everything you need to know about relationships, engagement, cultivating. In the sales cycle, it's a lot more than just selling. It's like really like the intricacies of it. And I looked up to him massively. He was a fantastic guy to work for. So they would be two pivotal people. In more recent years, actually, again, I had the same experience with the last time I kind of worked for someone instead of myself was an Irish guy called Rian. Actually, don't know if you know him. Be well known in the Irish tech circles and sales circles over the last kind of 30 years. And he taught me, it took me up another level of step change in people skills and managing in all directions, and how to get the best out of people, how to get the best out of yourself, and I suppose most importantly how to get the best out of your customers and have a win-win relationship with them, which ultimately results in increased engagement, increased sales. And so that was there are probably 3 people that may be pivotal in me getting to where I am today, which is in like heavily involved in like very, very fast growing tech startup, which I co-founded with an amazing guy called Charles Dowd, and so running that now, and it's a very, very exciting time.
Well, shout out to all those 3 individuals and your co-founder Charles. One more question before we move on to all the good stuff. Through a bit of research, I know that you've got 1, a helicopter license, 2, you're a fan of Metallica, and 3, that you're a father. So what's one thing you like to do outside of work?
Outside of those, tennis. I actually I've taken tennis back up again after 7 years off. I met my wife during tennis. Actually, I used to play a lot, and we had a daughter who's kind of now at the age where we can actually get her involved in tennis, and that's so we started going back. And I'm getting coached by former Irish #1 Jenny Claffey, who's amazing. A few years ago, she was the #1 in the country professional tennis player, and I'm really enjoying that now.
Epic. Strike, which we're going to talk about later in the podcast, is not your first business. You were CEO in North America and co-founder of CI Solutions. That got acquired. Then CEO and co-founder of All Data Systems. That got acquired. They were both 3-year ventures. Is there a significance to that? I know some people that I know who consider their business career in plays, 3 years, 4 years there, 3 years, 4 years there. Was the aim to kind of roll out a playbook with the aim of being acquired after you hit a certain target, or was that just a coincidence?
No, and in both of those cases, they were probably acquired a little bit too soon. There wasn't a time frame around them. There wasn't, there wasn't a VC clock in there, for instance, where they wanted an exit within 36 months or anything like that. It just happened to be circumstance that the both of them had opportunities for an exit. With my view, it actually is not really so much around time; it's about value. Like in a year, probably built up more value in Strike than those two previous companies that you mentioned had in 3 years. It's running much more quickly than any company actually I've been with. I think this is the 9th tech company startup I've been with. So it's definitely the fastest kind of on the ground and out the door. I would say with this, our play. The likelihood is we will be, acquired by one of the bigger payments tech companies, and we don't have a time frame around that. It's just when it makes sense in terms of, proper traction, proper value. We wouldn't like someone knocking on our door right now, even though we've got something very valuable and we probably get a nice exit, but the direction it's going in and the growth that we're experiencing, we know that we'd be way better off holding off for a bit longer to get really a nicer next step.
Well, as we make our way towards all good things about Strike, 2005 you co-founded and were CEO, and I may butcher the name, Pleba, world's first mobile banking app. I'm looking at my screen in case you're wondering where I'm looking at the moment. 52,000 services in 32 countries. You noted 2 lessons learned from this business. 1, timing. It's not always good to be first. You say that the second mouse gets the cheese. And 2, do one thing and do it well. Can you speak to both of those lessons learned and how you came to learn those lessons from that business?
Yeah, so on the timing one, I believed actually, when I started that, I was with a Nova UCD spinoff called Changing Worlds, which was a mobile portal company and mobile portal personalization. And I'd seen through that people were absolutely going to use their phone for way more. This is 2006, pre-iPhone. It was very difficult to use the internet on the phone. People were, if they were lucky, had a phone that had a Vodafone Live button on it, or an O2 Active button, and that was the only internet that people knew on their phones. But I really believed that the shift was going to move from the desktop to the mobile, and what I felt people were probably going to do was book things from their phone. At the time, the only way you could book something on your phone was to phone the number of a hotel or something. But I felt that people would be able to use clicks on their phone, data, whatever, through a website. And so I got together with a chap called Frank Field, who's he's very senior developer guy. He actually leads the blockchain R&D team for the biggest investment bank in the world, actually, Fidelity Investments. But at the time, I had this idea. Sorry, actually, we both had the idea. I don't remember whose idea it was, but I certainly believed that the booking would be done on the mobile. And so we built a user-generated platform that people could actually put their own content on there, and then invited different companies to come in and make their services available for the mobile. And one of the first companies I approached was Auto Europe, which at the time was, I think, the biggest car rental firm in Europe. And I approached them and I said, I think people are going to book their car rentals through mobile internet. And at the time, mobile internet was kind of really a concept that people only knew through .mobi. Do you remember .mobi? Yeah. So what they encouraged you to do was to buy, instead of buying a .com domain, you buy a .mobi. So we had pleba.mobi as well as pleba.com, by the way, but we were pushing pleba.mobi because the emphasis was use this on your phone, not on your desktop.
Yeah.
And so I approached Auto Europe and I said, people are going to book car rentals on their phone and not through the desktop. And they said, well, maybe we're willing to give it a go. So the first car rental bookings on the mobile were done through Pliva.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was basically a feed from out of Europe. And then I approached Ray Nolan at Hostel World. Do you remember them?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I said to him, people are going to book hostels on their phone. They're not going to book it on a desktop. And he said something like, "I think you're smoking crack. They're not, you know." And he didn't buy it. And I said, "No, honestly," and I like, "Let me try." And he said, "Okay, well, I'll give you an XML feed if you want." So the first ever hostel booking on the mobile was done through Pliva as well. And anyway, fast forward, we had 52,000 different services on there. But we found it very, very difficult to get people to use it. I couldn't even get my parents, my family and friends to use it for three reasons. One is because it was so slow. This is back in, I don't even know if we're 2G, but we're only there. The second is they were really worried about the costs. Is this going to cost me €10, you know, to book because of the data?
Of course, yeah.
Because it was pre-Wi-Fi, you couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi, pre-iPhone. And the third one was, you know, so it was slow and clunky, and it was just getting people to do something new. I knew that they were going to do it, but it was very, very difficult. And so Frank and I, you know, we raised friends and family money. We kind of, we ran out of money before everything was fixed by the iPhone. And if we'd had another runway of maybe even 10 or 12 months, we probably would have had a native app we would have had on there. And so we would have had, you know, Uber before Uber, you know, Bolt before hotels.com before hotels.com, or OpenTable before OpenTable, before all of these people. And that leads me directly into the second lesson, which is do one thing and do well. One thing. If we just focused on taxis, you know, maybe we actually, you know, would have nailed that vertical. If we just focus on hostels, you know, and if we just focus on restaurant bookings, or actually there are all sorts of other things on there, like massages and, you know, haircuts and all that kind of, you know, maybe if we just focused on salons, you know, we would have had forest before forest. And the point is we were stretched so thin. So our marketing dollars were completely spread super thin to consumers, and as I said, it was very difficult to convert. So the lesson I learned there is you know, focus very, very clearly on doing one thing very well, and that rings true. You know, is kind of 15 years later, and you know, Charles and I in Strike have that daily on our minds. You know, because there's so many distractions. People come to us, you know, if not every day, certainly every few days, saying, "Hey, can we use Strike for this? Can you use Strike for that?" Like we had one of the biggest provider of portaloos, you know, in Europe come to us saying, "Hey, can we use Strike to take payments to get into our portaloos, because, you know, because of COVID, you can't get into kind of restaurants and bars or whatever to go to the loo. And they want to put them everywhere, and they want to get paid." And we're like, you know, we probably, yes, of course we could, but that's not our business. You know, we're just folks really, really, really narrow. And so we have people like that approaching us all the time to use Strike, and it's just making the smart decisions.
The two lessons you learned from that venture were incredibly impressive, and they've obviously stood with you. The first one, for me, it took me a while to wrap my head around, because I always had the idea of first mover advantage. But I guess if you obviously need early adopters, if that's the case, and if they're not familiar or used to the product, or even if some habit doesn't exist, then that can be very difficult. So I can now fully wrap my head around that part of it. You mentioned Strike. A couple of companies that have trusted you are the likes of Camille, Pygmalion. You've partnered with Bolt. Anyone who's not familiar with Bolt, Luke Mackey leads that in Ireland. They're essentially at like the Irish Uber. What was it that what gap did you see this time? Because you're notorious for spotting something before other people can spot something. What was it that you saw with Strike?
In general, or not talking about Bolt? Yeah. What actually, yeah. So what happened was very, very quickly into the first proper lockdown, which is in March 2020. Within a week, I'd stopped carrying cash altogether, and I probably wasn't far off from it anyway, because I was using contactless payments a lot. But I completely got rid of all cash. Myself and my wife, we actually stopped carrying it. And then within probably a couple of weeks, I actually didn't even carry my cards anymore, my debit card or my credit card, because I have my Revolut card in my just double tap.
Yeah, same.
Well, I just pay with my Revolut, or on my watch. I just double tap and pay with my Revolut, I also have N26 and Bank of Ireland, so all three of them are in my phone. And I then just took a picture of my driver's license, so I had that on my phone. And I realized actually the only thing you need to carry is your phone. And that was great. Then after a few weeks, I realized actually there were a few occasions where I actually wanted to give someone money and I couldn't. And it was the Just Eat delivery guy on Friday nights that we normally get at takeaway. I'd normally tip them, and I was kind of embarrassed. And I, the second time this happened, I said, "Look, I'm really sorry. I don't carry cash." And he said, "It's okay. No one's tipping anymore. Don't worry about it. No one has cash anymore." And this happened a few times, and I realized, okay, this is a big thing. A lot of people have been affected by this. And I looked into into Ireland and the UK and the US, and I reckon about 60 million people alone were affected just by the drop in tips. And tips is only kind of one part of our business, but I realized that actually there is a gap for a totally seamless person-to-person payments.
Yeah.
With someone that you don't know, right? And the reason I say it's someone you don't know is because you're not going to ask them their phone number or an email address, or because there are other apps where you can actually, where if both parties happen to be an account holder, you can get their phone number or email address and send them money. But I wanted it to be fast as getting cash out of your pocket. I don't want to have to install an app or create an account or anything in order to tip this person. I want to just tap and tip. And I thought there's got to be a way of doing this, and so I kind of thought of a way theoretically of doing it, and that's when I reached out to the leading payments tech expert in Ireland, and right, and said, could we use NFC technology and to do this? Is there some way that we could trigger the secure event, the payment, and move it onto the phone, but have it triggered by something that never needs power? Never is always going to work. It doesn't need to be plugged in. Is very small. Is low cost. Is low cost enough that we could actually ship out 60 million of them to those people that I was talking about, and that they would all happily take them and immediately have a secure payment terminal that's locked to them forever, without us having to set them up manually. And no one had done that before. And so anyway, so he came back and I think it was the next day, and said, I think it's possible. I think it's patentable, and I'll quit my job and join you. And within 24 hours, we were already building the product. And that was Charles Dowd, obviously, in case it wasn't. And so 3 months later, we're actually revenue generating in a trial scenario. We're actually, which we made revenue from. We had a global patent filed we filed in New York. The reason we filed it in the US is because it's global protection, and also it's scaled. So the likes of PayPal and SumUp and all these guys, can't see it for a period while we're out there getting traction. So that's why we filed it in the US, and also with a view to the biggest tipping market in the world.
Yeah. 3 final questions for you, Ollie. Third last one is, I've noticed that you're hiring sales managers is the role you're hiring for the moment. There's an article by Harvard Business Review that says the cost of a bad hire is 5 times the annual salary of that given person. And not just making up their salary, but like deals lost because of them being a bad sales manager. Have you a process for hiring? Like, do you run psychometric tests? Do you run through a defined process? Have a board of people that they get to meet, ask questions? Or after 9 startups, I think it was 9 you referenced, is it just a gut feel?
We're doing a combination of all of that. Actually, gut feel is really important, and the tests, actually, one of the platforms that we're using actually does those tests for us. So they actually put them through various different kind of attitude and language and skill set tests. Um, so that helps filter out some of it. What we're essentially looking to do is clone our best salesperson. You know, it's kind of, I keep thinking, is this, you know, is this another Gail, you know, who's, and she's, you know, head of business development, and she's absolutely fantastic. I'm like, oh, we want to do is like it more like her. She's just so amazing, you know. But and then the kind of the final thing that I have in the back of my mind with a view to the company growing and people kind of moving up and kind of, you know, having their own teams and everything. And this also came, did you quote, who did you quote there? Was it Harvard?
Yes, Harvard Business Review.
Yeah, I think I actually saw the same. I saw a presentation from them specifically on recruitment. And the one take, it was amazing. The one takeaway I had from it was when you're hiring, if you hire an A player, they will in turn hire A players in their team, right? But if you hire a B, if you compromise and hire a B player, they will hire C players on their team because they're not going to hire anyone that they feel threatened by. And I think I was thinking, gosh, that is a massive mistake to make in the beginning, not hiring A players, because you're absolutely just going to collapse. You're going to go straight to the bottom. So it's very, very, at this stage, it's really important to have A players only, because they will in turn hire people as good as them.
Second last question for you, Ollie, is for our American audience, which is growing. I'm referencing high school, but for our British and Irish audience, I'm referencing secondary school. If you had a magic wand and were the final decision maker on adding a new subject to the curriculum, and it was all in your hands, what subject would it be and why?
Oh, that really easy. I mean, I really wish it was in my school, and it was. So not necessarily entrepreneurialism, but certainly like business management. There was nothing I was taught in school about starting your own business. And I really think that would have been fantastically useful, certainly for me anyway, and most people kind of like me. You know, I've learned the hard way, you know. I've made all the mistakes. Sorry, not all of them, probably. I've made a lot of mistakes because I never really had any kind of proper entrepreneurial training or running your own business type training. And if you can teach people that at an early age, you know, you'll have people starting, people with their own businesses at the age of 15, 16. It'd be fantastic to see that.
There's a couple of cool people on the scene at the moment in Ireland. Charlie Butler, Luke Ryan, a couple of other people, names are not coming to my head, that are in that 18 to 22-year-old category, working closely with Scale Ireland, that have phenomenal ideas. So it's great to see that. My last question for you is, I'd like you to imagine we're talking as if it's the year 2030 and you're looking back on the last decade. You can answer this personally, professionally, a combination of both. But if you're imagining it's now 2030 and you're looking back, what would you like to be looking back on?
I'd like to be looking back on Strike as an organization that employs, you know, a number of thousands of people. I'm not necessarily there at the helm anymore, but seeing that it's created, you know, it's created a lot of happy livelihoods and has increased incomes for tens of millions of people around the world whose incomes were affected when people stopped carrying cash. So, but also more than that, they're not just using Strike for, you know, to supplement their income with tips. They're actually using Strike for all of their income, actually, all payments.
Wow.
And make, yeah. And so we just made it so much easier for people to get paid. And it doesn't really matter what that payment is, whether it's, you know, whether it's for a job, whether it's your salary, or whether it's just a tip. We've just made it so much easier that everyone wants to use it.
And more instant as well.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Ollie, thanks for being my guest today. I wish you continued success going forward to grow the company and whatever may be in the next 5 to 10 years. But for today, thanks for being my guest and best of luck.
Thanks very much, Rian.